Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. This is week 5 of our 6-week series, Touchstone, the revelation of wholeness, body, mind, and soul. We did 2 weeks on body, and we finished 2 weeks on mind, and now we begin the last 2 weeks on soul. The premise for this work that we're doing spiritually is that we're already whole. We're already, in some traditions, we're called image bearers, made in the image and likeness of the divine. We're already whole. In some places, we're not fully realizing it. We're not in touch with it. And so we feel broken. We feel less than perfect. But there is a wholeness that is who and what we are that holds even the imperfection and the brokenness and remains whole. That's who we are. I'm going to talk about the soul, but first a joke. Life is hard. You know, we don't do the Pollyanna thing here. We don't pretend that if you're just spiritual enough, it'll all just feel good all the time. That's not the way it works. What we teach is that, I know I'm just preaching, I haven't gotten to the joke yet. What we teach is that if we're willing to live our lives on a spiritual basis, we have tools to face the difficult times. One of those tools is called therapy, and I'm a big proponent and recipient of the gift of it. Well, a young woman had decided finally to get herself into therapy and begin to work on some of her childhood issues and trauma. And then she said this: I just found out today that my therapist has a therapist, and I think it's my fault. As I was preparing to do 2 weeks speaking about the soul, I thought, what the heck am I going to talk about? Because nobody agrees about what it is. Charles Fillmore, he believes the soul is to be the sum total of our conscious and unconscious mind. There are others, many of us come from a tradition where our souls were needing to be saved to get somewhere good. There are just lots of different ways of understanding it. And so I've been studying, and I used to I still love, I haven't read them in a while, the Thomas More books, Care of the Soul, and he's a Jungian, and that's kind of the approach that feels right for me. So please don't give me correction on what the soul is and how I got it wrong today. I'm just offering this perspective on how we can use this idea to tap into more of our innate wholeness. With body and mind, we were talking about the way that we have to bring the wholeness into those areas of our experience to live more wholly in body and mind. The soul is already whole. In the way that I'm using it, let me give you a little definition here. This comes from Thomas More, or maybe it's not even a definition as much as it is just a description. This is what More says: tradition teaches that soul lies midway between understanding and consciousness, and that its instrument is neither mind nor body, but imagination. Soul is not a thing, not a quality or a dimension of experiencing life in ourselves. It has to do with depth, value, relatedness, heart, and personal substance. And I've been working on this material for months now, and so because I recorded the small group curriculum a few weeks ago, and I just sort of did my own, what do I feel that soul is? And so there are 3 things that came to mind. It is our highest wisdom self. It is our deepest essence. And the soul is innocent, untouched by harm in any way. That which was before we took birth, that which transcends death. And that, you just know it when you feel it. I like when Thomas More says it's not a thing you point to, but it's an experience you have. It's a way of interacting with reality. Think about Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul. Getting choked up on Aretha. But you know that, what do we mean by soul music? It has depth. power, feeling. Sometimes I feel like my soul is like a bell inside me, that when I get next to something real, it just resonates and rings. The innocence piece, I want to talk about that today. That was the thing that just kept coming up and kept coming up. There's a Sarah McLachlan song that says, "We are born innocent, and we are still innocent." That poor young woman and her therapist thinking she caused her therapist to have to get a therapist. We take on the difficulties of the world as if we've caused them sometimes. Children do that. Children are beautifully narcissistic. They just think if something happens, it's all about them. But it's why children are so easily traumatized by divorce of the parents, by abuse, because they think, I must have done something. And I was thinking about this idea of we know that children are innocent, and we can tell them, but that feeling of taking it on happens. And I was remembering like childhood memories, early ones for me, and two came to mind. I was still in a crib, so I must have been around 2, and I don't know what happened, but I remember crying, and I mentioned last week when we were talking about heart and mind, I'm a feeler, always have been. And something had happened that was the greatest tragedy of all time to my 2-year-old self, and I had cried and cried and cried. My mom got me settled down, put me in the crib, and I was trying to calm down and take a nap, and you know that thing, try to breathe and catching breath. And I remember, that's my experience. I remember lying in the crib and not able to stop that ragged breath. And then I remember it just kind of eased. And then I guess I fell asleep. And I was just thinking about that innocent child that I was, experiencing so much pain and distress. Who knows what it was about? But if you have any memories like that, or you certainly have with your own children and grandchildren, you see that experience. And then another memory surfaced of me, maybe 3, but small enough that I could lie on my father's chest when he was taking a nap, and we took a nap together. And I was noticing his breath and how the breaths were even, and then would come a longer breath. And that's the memory. Just being right there with my dad as he breathed. I didn't realize it today. I'm going to tell a bit more about my dad later, but tomorrow is the 7th anniversary of his death. And this time of year, many cultures and traditions say the veil thins, which is why in Mexico, celebrating the Day of the Dead in a few days, and All Hallows Eve and Halloween, that we're connected to something beyond this life at this time. And I feel like my dad's here with me. And in some ways, I can still feel that connection and be lying on his chest and our hearts beating and me feeling his breath. That's innocence. And so much of my work in recovery, my work in spiritual growth, has been to reclaim that original innocence. Because I, like that woman in therapy, I thought a lot was my fault. And believe me, I made some really poor decisions and took some really not wise actions in my life. I caused some damage in my less evolved self. And the truth is, I probably still am. I'm still evolving. I'm still making mistakes. Some that harm me or others. And my work now is just to become more aware of it more quickly. And to make those amends and to intend to be better. But I can still take on that, and sometimes we call it the metaphysical guilt path, where the metaphysical golden hammer, one teacher called me, where we believe that our thoughts are creative, and so we are responsible for our experience. And so when something bad happens, we have the bad experience, but then we do the second arrow, as Buddha talked about it. I should never have done that. I know better than that. Why did I think that? Why did I create this? You see what I'm saying? Like we've had this difficult experience, and then we make ourselves responsible in an unhealthy way. And we feel guilty about being human. You're innocent. Even with your mistakes and your shortcomings, you are innocent. That part of you that I'm going to call the soul today, all it does is sing the song of your wholeness for all eternity. And it's possible for each of us to live in harmony with that song more and more. And how do we know we're living from soul? Well, for me, it's a moment of simplicity and connection, just like me napping with my father. And I have those moments if I'm willing to stop and pay attention more and more often. There's something about that spontaneous arising of joy. Teilhard de Chardin said that joy is the surest sign of the presence of God. But I would also say it's a pretty good sign of the presence of soul. And it may come when you're weeding your garden. I have a friend that is her favorite spiritual practice, is to get out on her hands and knees and pull weeds. And there's a moment of joy. See, here's the thing. Your soul is not my soul. And this is why I like to differentiate between the words spirit and soul. I believe there's one spirit. That's a word that I'm going to really toe the party line on. In New Thought, in Unity, and in Science of Mind, and the other traditions within our tradition, we hold that there is one power, one presence, one life, one reality, one being, and we are all expressions of it. Everything is an expression of the one. This is how we are a Christian teaching and community, but this is where we're much more closely aligned with the Eastern traditions of Hinduism and Buddhism, because we don't believe in a dualistic worldview. That we're all in this together. And at source, we are one, and yet, Ernest Holmes says, unity is not uniformity. That our differences are good. Our uniqueness, our authentic expression is right. And you're supposed to be you and not me, Joanne. You don't have any problem with that, do you? You ain't got no problem with that. We're supposed to be ourselves fully, freely, living the life that is meant for us. And so the soul will help us if we listen. And if we don't listen, the soul will help us. Have you ever heard this thing about the gentle whisper, the tap at the shoulder, the cosmic 2x4? That's the soul helping y'all. That midlife crisis, there's your soul talking to you. That diagnosis, that divorce, that death, all of those difficult things we go through are another way the soul calls us home. I have spent so much energy in my life people-pleasing. Anybody else got this disease? Man, I have spent so much of my life out there. What do you need me to be? Okay, I'll be that. What do you need me to be? Okay, I'm going to do that. And it has kept me from the joy of being me at times. Now, thank God, when I got into recovery, I had a very wise woman who said, you need to go work on that thing too. And I did. And I've been continuing to work on that idea that I am not responsible for you, but I am responsible for me. There's a great, I wish I didn't know I was going to tell this one so I don't get all the names right, but it's from the rabbinical tradition. I don't think it was Eleazar, but one of the great rabbis. At the end of his life, he said, when I'm dead, God will not ask me, Eleazar, why were you not Moses? Why were you not Abraham? But what God will say is, Eleazar, why were you not Eleazar? That is the call for you to be you. Fully, deeply, wholly. And if you've got a crisis, don't waste it. Don't waste any good crisis. If things aren't working the way they used to work in your life, celebrate it. Do something different, because your soul is going to try this. The soul is not concerned with outcomes. The soul is not concerned with succeeding, and I hate that because I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. The soul is seeking for you to express and experience life in the most authentic and pleasing way that you ever could. And you know what? It can happen a lot of different ways. There's no one right path for your soul's expression and fulfillment. But it will sure tell you when you're off the path. And if we begin to find that tuning, that, again, I'm using the word harmony, but when we begin to hear the song of the soul, weeding the garden or cooking a meal, reading a particular author, serving the homeless in the city of Houston. If you begin to find those ways and doings in the life that feels right for me, and that feels wrong for me. It's kind of like, I wish there were a less militant symbol here, but the heat-seeking missile, it doesn't go straight to the target. Do you know that? It gets off course, and then it knows it's off course, and it corrects. That's the way, I've got to find a better metaphor for that. But you get the point. The way that, Emerson had a great quote about, I have so many quotes I'm not using. All these other ones are coming to mind. I'm sorry. But Emerson talked about that the course of the sailboat may seem from a far enough distance to be directional, but you know what it's made of? Tacking back and forth. Tacking back and forth. All right. Judi Dench. Do y'all like Judi Dench? I adore her. She's 88, British actress, brilliant. I just get a sense of her wholeness that she reveals, both in her craft and her person. She says this about getting older. Don't prioritize your looks, my friend. They will change forevermore. That pursuit is one of much sadness and disappointment. Do I need to read that again for anybody? I thought so. Don't prioritize your looks. They will change forevermore. That pursuit is one of much sadness and disappointment. Prioritize the uniqueness that makes you you, and the invisible magnet that draws other like-minded souls to dance in your orbit. These are the things which will only get better and better. But it takes courage to be you, because other people might not want you to be you. And when you start being you, they're like, what happened to that other you? That people pleaser? I like that one. It's courage. Carl Jung says the opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. There's so much I want to tell you today. And I moved my point down. Okay, last point. Again, this idea of the soul being the center of our innocence has kept coming back to me, and there's a lot of teaching about this, and Jesus of Nazareth talked about it specifically and often, at least in the text that has come down to us, that he was reported to have said. I don't know, it wasn't there, but there is enough evidence that we know that this man existed, this beautiful, peaceful rabbi in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. I do have the sense that there are some times that Jesus is standing in the back of church going, I never said that. That is not what I meant. In Unity, we hold Jesus a little differently. We don't look to Jesus as being Savior. We look to Jesus as being elder brother, big brother Jay. We look to Jesus as being the master teacher, the way shower. I have to use it. My skin cells are getting old. My brain cells are getting old. My bone cells are getting old. But evidently, my fat cells have accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior because they seem to be living eternally. There you go. Isn't that great? In the 4 canonical Gospels, I'm going to use some theological terms. It means it's in the canon, in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In those 4 Gospels, the first 3 are called the synoptic Gospels. They tell the story. They're linear. They tell the story of Jesus' life, intermixed with a lot of healing stories and parables and teachings, miracles, all of that. Well, this was an important story it's in all 3 of the synoptic Gospels. I'm going to read it from Mark. Chapter 10, people were bringing the little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. But when Jesus saw this, he became indignant. He said to them, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. And truly I will tell you that anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. Now here's where it gets a little weird for some of you who are just out of the evangelical world. And I'm going to talk about the Gospel of Thomas. This is one of the Gnostic Gospels. It didn't make the final cut. But for over 3 centuries, this book was revered as just as sacred and had just as much transformational energy as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Thomas says, Jesus saw some babies nursing, and he said to his disciples, "These nursing babies are like those who enter the kingdom." And they said to them, "Then we shall enter the Father's kingdom as babies?" And Jesus said to them, "When you make the two into one, when you make the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner, the upper like the lower, when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, nor the female be female. When you make eyes in the place of an eye, a hand in the place of a hand, a foot in the place of a foot, an image in the place of an image, then will you enter the kingdom." That's a whole month series right there. But the teaching is this. The innocence, that which ushers us into the kingdom of heaven, is the unconditioned, innocent, undifferentiated part of ourselves that is not living out here, that is living authentically here. This is the call of the soul for us to come home to the sweet and simple, honest and authentic expression of who we are. Aside from the names that we were given, the genders we've been told, this is how you act if you're this way, if you get this one. Beyond all of that, there is a purity, a song that is only yours, that is calling to you. I was 4 years old. My family didn't have much money. My dad got maybe a 2 weeks vacation, but in 1 week of his vacation, we would camp out on the creeks near Avan, Oklahoma, where I grew up. And he would go to the landowners and say, "I'd like to have my wife and kids out here camping. Is that okay? We'll do some fishing and swimming." And my dad was great. He was a big hunter and fisher, and he would always give the landowners the tithes of his effort, and they loved him. He was a good guy. So we were out on Bird Creek on Miss Long's land. That was the Long Ranch. And I was 4, and I loved these experiences. I loved swimming. I was this little nature boy. I was barefoot all summer long, maybe five, because I had memories of being camping before. And my dad's going to prepare the campsite, and he invited me to go with him, or my mom said, "Take that boy." And so I remember I was wearing a lime green polyester bathing suit with a blue, navy blue, like electric blue waistband, and that was it. That's all I was wearing because I was ready to go swimming. So we're go to the campsite. I knew the creek was over here. My dad stopped the truck so he could undo a gate and go across the cattle guard or something, and I thought we're there. I jumped out of the truck, and I ran over the creek bank to get in the water and swim. As a little kid is wont to do, if you're me, I have always been a little bit of a leap before you look kind of a person. I came into full contact and relationship with a greenbrier patch. Some of you know what those are. They're these thin, tiny little vines that wrap around everything, and they've got long thorns on them. And I was in it. And I began to cry, and I would scream. I was trying to get out. The more that I pulled out of it, the more scratched I was getting. I was bloody and terrified. Terrified. "Daddy, help me." And my dad wouldn't have been more than 36, something like that, young man himself. And he rushed down, and my dad was hard. He was gruff with us. I mean, he was a Virgo. There's one right way to do everything. And so I thought I'm going to be in trouble, but I'm terrified. He came and he gets me out somehow, disentangles me and with all my scratches, and he puts me on his shoulder, takes me back up, and then I was traumatized the rest of the day. My dad loved telling that story, and I hated it. Because like the woman in therapy, I thought the point of that story was it was my fault. I messed up. It was my fault. I was 45 years old before I realized the reason he told the story is because he got to help his son who he loved. He got to do something that helped me because I had a lot of things by that point in my life that he couldn't help with anymore. But it was not that long ago. And I got to tell him, I've told this story here a couple of times, but I got to stand on another church's pulpit and tell my dad this story of what it meant. I recaptured my innocence. It was a thing that happened that was, to a 5-year-old, horrible, awful. It was not that big a deal. For many years, for decades, it was an example of how flawed I was, of how many mistakes I made, how wrong I've gotten it. I used that example to tell that story for decades. And I had a lot of other stories. I've been in a lot of briar patches. A lot. And at 45, I had had enough recovery, healing, new thought teaching, prayer to recognize that's never what that meant. That was about the connection of our souls. This man who loved me, who I miss as if he died yesterday. When I came out at 19, he put his arms around me. Uneducated, high school education in a little town in Oklahoma, born-again Christian dad. He put his arms around me and said, I love you. I'm your daddy. You're my son. You're always welcome in this home. And he was good as his word. Became my biggest champion and advocate. And I, through my own false belief of myself, had separated myself from his love in some way because of the way I understood the story. You're doing that right now. I'm still doing it around other things that have happened in my life where I think it's my fault. I should have known better. I have damaged this, I have damaged that, I've damaged them. And what I'm here to remind you, it's not your fault. There is a part of you that has always and will eternally be the innocent joy of a child. Enter the kingdom of God. Reclaim your innocence. Would you pray with me now? And so we do recognize that one life, that one source of all being, the kingdom of the queendom, the realm of infinite good, of which we are all members, all expressions of this ground of perfect being and wholeness. And I give thanks for the soul, my own soul, which sings my song, and the soul of every person within the sound of my voice, that is even now gently singing the song, beckoning us all home to our most authentic, most essential, most real version of ourselves. And so today we all have this opportunity. And I trust that as I am in this moment committing to live more authentically, more freely, I trust that many, many more of us are making that same commitment right now. To be the truth of who we already are, to live our wholeness, to live our power, to live our divine destiny of just being who we are fully. And so we are blessed and we are innocent. And I trust that everything that needs to occur for each of us to find this freedom of soul is already with us, already within us, already before us. The path is made as we take the step along the road. It is done. It is done. And with gratitude, I release this prayer, letting it be. And so it is. Amen. I'm a big feeler. I already told you that. But I feel so much love for this community. I'm so here for you. And I don't want you to ever think that I've got it figured out, because I don't. But I am committing to growth and to healing of my own soul, and I'm here to guide you and help you where I can. You're worth it. If no one has told you today that they love you, I love you. God bless you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.